Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Hello Zany people. So yeah, like I promised, I'm doing a video on ranged for Skaven, and specifically for the Skaven because I think every faction's or every warband's ranged options are different. This is just my take on the range situation in this game, as well as how it relates with the Skaven. So take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, I'm not the expert at this game. I just played it a lot recently. So first of all, Skaven ranged. There's two choices. There's shurikens and there is warp clock pistols. They both have the same range. So let's start off with that. So ranged weapons, generally you want obviously more ranged because then you can shoot something from further. At 15 meters, it's really the shortest range out of any of the ranged weapons. So it's really not that good at kiting people because of the fact that you have to be so close to the enemy melee. And it's basically, like if they walk one step forward, they could charge you. So that's one consideration. Also, both warp clock pistols and shurikens, because they're such close ranged, enemy range units with greater range than you can shoot you from outside of your range. So, for example, if you were to try to exploit any sort of terrain weaknesses by getting on top of a bridge or on top of a building, thinking that it'll give you an advantage because you'll have high ground and then, it's harder for people to access you or melee can't charge you, well, they can just bring in their ranged units, and as long as their ranged weapons outdistance your shurikens and warp clock pistol, which, is pretty much every weapon in the game, they're just gonna sit there outside your range and hit you for free. So that's another reason why I was just looking at the stats on paper. I don't like the concept of having focusing on ranged with a Skaven. And finally, you have to understand that with each unit that you take away from melee and classify as a ranged unit, you're taking away from the total number of melee units on your team, making your melee a lot weaker. As the Skaven, you really rely on your melee to do maximum damage in the shortest amount of time by surrounding an enemy and taking them out before their allies can respond, like I showed you in the previous video. Personally, for me, that sort of thing feels like what the Skavens need to be doing all the time to catch an enemy alone, or a small group of enemies alone on their own, separate from the main group, and then just kill them really quickly before their allies can help. It's kind of the guerrilla warfare tactics that I believe is really good for the Skaven units. And having ranged, or in focusing on ranged, it really doesn't help that. I don't think that actually gives you the same edge. Ranged weapons generally don't do as much damage. Also, if you scratch the damage part, but because I hadn't actually put points into it. Obviously, if you put more points into it, it's gonna do quite a bit of damage, but you can't sandwich someone to prevent them from retreating. So if you don't manage to kill them in one turn, obviously they're going to have another turn. The unit that you caught off away from the main group will have the option of running away and disengaging from you if you don't completely surround them or sandwich them between your units. And with the ranged unit, you can't really sandwich people, obviously. So that's another consideration that goes against using ranged. Finally, the the fact that, like, if any of your melee units were to engage the enemy in melee combat, your ranged units all suffer a huge penalty to the chance to hit the enemy because they're engaged in melee combat. It's kind of like your friendly units are blocking line of sight or blocking the line of fire, if you will. They're getting in the way of line of fire, so that makes it hard for you to shoot at the enemy reliably. So that also just makes it so that, okay, if you're gonna go ranged, your melee is gonna be weak. So it's better if you just either don't bring ranged or go all ranged and focus on ranged as an entire faction doctrine. Now, I haven't actually tried going all ranged with my Skaven, but I figured it's really not my style. I don't think that's gonna help me because I don't see a group of Skavens surrounding an enemy at ranged and taking them out before the enemy can get there to reinforce. I don't think that's ever really gonna happen. I think you need to do melee for that. And then as an additional consideration, a lot of the ranged stats in this game are really ambiguous. It's really hard to understand how some of these ranged mechanics work. They don't really explain it very clearly. Like, there are still skills that you can learn, such as overhead, that helps you increase your hit chance when you're higher than the target. But from what I know, or from what I can remember, it also mentioned that you get some sort of bonus for being overhead without this passive. So I don't know the actual calculations for that. So like, a lot of the math in this game is really hidden. I figured that all the math for the melee is a lot more straightforward than the ranged ones. So it just feels like there's a lot more hidden information about ranged than the melee. And then let's talk about some good points about range and sort of what you can do, because I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it doesn't fit the ambusher style that I like to play. The good part about ranged is that there's some skills that allow you to really shut down an enemy by removing their offensive points. But like, you know, crippling shot. There's things that remove their movement stuff. Their what is it called? Remove their strategy points. You can do. You can block their stances with nerve shot. Like, it inflicts statuses, and it's really good if you can stack a bunch of these. Unfortunately, you can't, as it says here. But if you could like have a bunch of units on your team do crippling shots with warp poison. This is actually a build someone talked to me about on the forums, on one of the forums. I forget which. I might come back and edit this video, or like I might annotate this video to give the proper citation for it. But someone suggested warp poison with crippling shot to combo that to really reduce the enemy's warp offense points by a lot. And I think that was a good, that's a good combo. It's a good choice. But overall, it feels like ranged is very gimmicky. It's really reliant on these little things in the skill tree, and it's not as focused around positioning, and you don't get as much benefits out of positioning better. And even if you do, it's very minor because of the problem that all the Skaven ranged weapons are actually very, very short ranged. And I just feel more comfortable if, for example, if I'm trying to dedicate myself to range, I would probably do the mercenary faction, the human faction, where they actually have rifles that go up to like, I think it's 30 or 35 meter range. That makes me feel more comfortable. Like when you have weapons at that range in this game, then that I would say, okay, that's a good sort of ranged unit to have, because at that point, at that distance, you're not really worried as much about melee units or things getting in the way. You're literally sniping across large portions of the map. Oh, and finally, let's talk about the map. I feel like ranged in this game is also greatly limited by the fact that the terrain is in a city and that all the maps are inside a city. Well, you know, as you well know, cities have lots of buildings, and lots of buildings equals lots and lots of places where you can just stand behind a wall and shut down enemy ranged line of sight. Meaning, yeah, you can have a weapon that's, you know, 30 meters in range, but if the enemy just steps behind the wall, it doesn't matter how much range you have, you can't shoot through a wall. And it's gonna really limit your ability to shoot people and kite. If this game had a lot of open fields or castles where you have to siege from outside or something like that, I think ranged would be much more useful. But at the fact that you're playing a game that is entirely set in a city makes it so that range is just super iffy. It's definitely, you know, you can definitely make it effective, but it's really not something that stands out to me. And then finally, as a Skaven faction, I think sure, range can work, as it can work with any warband that has range weapons, but it doesn't seem optimal for me, because Skavens, I feel, really get more advantage. Their advantage really lies on their mobility and movement, and melee weapons are able to exploit those advantages a lot better. Finally, as you'll notice, I'm actually or you might or might not notice, but I'm recording this video not in full screen, and I also lowered the resolution of this game by a lot, and it's actually helping me with the performance of this game. It's not as laggy as before. Hopefully this will translate also into the campaign, and you know, when there are battles, hopefully that actually also helps the performance there. And if it does, I'll just keep recording this way, so long as it doesn't make my YouTube videos too blurry. So far it looks fine from my end, but I haven't uploaded this video yet, so I will see how it turns out. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. It's another short video. The next few videos is just gonna be like the next few videos that aren't battles, you know, the odd number videos. I'm gonna just talk about various different aspects of this game and just be a little bit of conversational chit chat, because, you know, for the most part in the early parts of the game, there's not a whole lot that's going on in these screens. I will note that I have a shipment request already, and the first shipment is 75. I already have 48 for the first two missions that I already done. So I'm pretty confident that I can fulfill this in the next 2 or 3 missions, if not the next 1 mission. So 13 days is plenty of time for me to do that. And then I guess the next odd numbered video, maybe episodes, well, this one's episode 5, so episode 7, I will go over this screen right here, the Smuggler's Den, and talk about some planning and stuff like that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Have a nice, wonderful evening.